to start. So before we start with the presentation, I just wanted to give a couple of disclaimers. Adam and I are not full-time Drupal developers, though we've had to sort of become one over the last couple of years. And also we're doing this talk collaboratively, so if we bump into each other a little bit, just sort of go with the flow. First off, I'm going to introduce us, and I'm going to be reading a little bit. We'll start talking later in the presentation. I'm Jessica Westbrook, and this is Adam Trowbridge. We're involved in academia and higher education. Both of us are assistant professors at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where we teach courses in the Department of Contemporary Practices. These are courses for first-year art and design students and in the Department of Art and Technology Studies. Our other collaborator, who teaches computer science through creative coding in a Chicago public school, is traveling right now and couldn't be here with us. So after years in IT and design fields, both Adam and I shifted to higher education with an interest in the intersection of critical thinking, transdisciplinary new media art and design craft, and social practice as a creative field. For the past 5 years, we have been focused on foundations level pedagogy and education. This means we are genuinely interested in reaching and encouraging beginners. As an aside, it is worth noting, since we're in a different territory today, that academia is generally in a transitional phase right now. It may be the beginning of an end, and our territories, art and design, are slow to adapt to culture and economic shifts, which means that they're still very attached to individual authorship and competition as core values. So that sort of describes a little bit of the sort of boundary that we're trying to sort of move beyond. So this short talk, it's 20 minutes, is called Open Source Textbook Togetherness, and it's the story of our ongoing project called Array, an online textbook. So this is the Array backstory. Our project began when we were granted a prestigious yet very modest $2,500 Rhizome.org commission in 2012. Rhizome.org is a web project run through the New Museum. Description from the Rhizome mission statement. As an arts organization based on the internet, we rethink artistic creation, distribution, and reception in relation to changing conditions associated with network technologies, shifting attention, uncertain objects, multiple authors, casual laborers. An affiliate and residence at the New Museum in New York, we are a leading international organization to support art and technology online since 1996. This is still a very small niche in the art and design world. We proposed open source textbook toolkit, which we later titled Array. Some of our motivations. Array is an online repository of entryways into new media, craft, processes, materials, cultures, and contexts specifically geared towards beginners, both teachers and students. Array content includes both project scenarios and essays as mechanisms for learning. Unlike a conventional printed textbook, Array can use the flexibility of the web platform to grow, change, and respond to shifts in art, design, and education. Array content includes both project scenarios and essays as mechanisms for learning. Array projects are modified as contributors test and refine their projects in studios and classrooms. Array essay and blog entries capture current thought and accumulate over time to reveal patterns and trends in thinking and activity. Our intention is to increase the number of students experiencing low-level approaches, as in command line prompts and programming, that remove as many layers of interface abstraction as possible. Specifically, we are offering an alternative to standard Creative Suite, registered trademark, or application-oriented approaches to new media aspects of art and design foundations. Some of our statements. Array is independent and non-corporate. Our editors, developers, advisors, contributors, and organizers are all teachers and professors deeply invested in education. Array is a repository of knowledge based on the idea that foundations of new media are constantly shifting, negotiating, contested, and divergent. Array is focused on art and design students because these are populations that can operate outside the bounds of acceptable behavior. Array is resistant to uncritical approaches to teaching contemporary media practices. Array is suspicious of concepts like access, innovation, and evidence-based strategies. Array is counter to cultures of training and certification. Array is interested in socio-political factors of interface, media, and distribution systems. Array is conscious of the complexity of learning over time, and Array is intended to assist teachers and learners in reducing fear and increasing agency. So those are all our motivations. The starting point for process with our project going back 2 years now is we worked up a general sitemap, developed wireframes, and a dynamic HTML proof of concept, kind of in traditional mode. Then we did some research towards which sort of platform we wanted to use for content, and then we tried to make it happen in Drupal, not the best workflow.
So if you're noticing that we're reading, academics really only have 2 modes. We either like read papers in front of conferences, or we're just like really loose and like talk to students. So we don't really have this mode of presentation that's common here. So it's a little bit of a culture shift. But so in the spirit of Array, which is teaching students to do things for themselves, we decided that not only would we develop the site in Drupal by ourselves, but that we would also start a server from scratch on a lib node. So we installed Debian 6, Apache, and none of us had ever been Linux admins before, so it was a really good idea to try to learn Drupal and how to be an Apache admin and MySQL, like all of it at the same time. We'd done development before. In fact, like the last year, we go back to the days of Cold Fusion, but we had taken a break from web development for a number of years, I'd say almost 10 years, so it was a weird shift to see how many more things were out there. So we tried to become responsive website developers and Drupal developers while we develop this site, and that's how we entertain ourselves. That's how we get our kicks. So this is why just last Sunday we had our first house guests in 2 years since we moved. We've had no one over. So developing the sitemap and the site and moving it to Drupal. So we developed things before. Is this oh, sorry. There we go. Yeah. So we developed this sitemap of exactly how the site should look and function. Jessica's a wonderful web developer in terms of it was responsive to different screens. It did everything. It was pretty much like it was a dynamic site without any backend. And then we tried to mix that with Drupal, which was horrible, horrendous nightmare. We had never seen so many divs in our life. We had never seen so many tags in our life. So we just faced this, we didn't know what the hell had happened. Scott Rigby, who apparently some of the people here know, who's pretty big in Drupal, had convinced us to use it. And I remember getting on IRC with him and saying, Scott, this is awful. This is the worst thing that I've ever seen in my life. So it took about a year for us to get Drupal plus CSS working together by just knocking out about 90% of everything that Drupal puts into a web page. So we stripped those things out, and then we were left with this tremendous learning curve of looking at, I had developed before a PHP, wait, is this the same one? Yes, no, yes. I had developed my own CMS in PHP probably in 1998 maybe? I don't know, no, later. But anyway. That was a pretty horrible nightmare as well, but I knew what PHP looked like, but when I opened the Drupal templates, I had no idea what I was looking at. So we ended up having multiple views. Views actually one of the things where it's like, okay, I understand this, I know how to structure this. And then finally we got so frustrated, we had multiple views for the same thing on different pages, so every time we made a change, we would have to go and change like 3 or 4 different views. So we called our friend j.duran, who's incredibly security conscious, so that's all he wants to be known by. If you look at his bio on the site, you'll see very little about him except that he teaches in Chicago public schools. But he was in the final stages of developing the art and design department site here at UIC, also using Drupal. So he developed the entire site using custom PHP, completely ignoring the Drupal way. So all of his code is custom and basically just pulls directly from the Drupal object. So what we ended up doing is taking our views-based approach. For those of you who are new, it's just a way of framing content. The intro lecture this morning, I went over it well, but views as a way of framing the content of the Drupal nodes. So we took those and combined them with our own custom PHP template, and also ended up with a site like Jesus' previous site. Did I say this called him? We ended up creating a non-Drupal way, but functioning very well right now site. So while we definitely cursed Drupal for the first year, we appreciated the modules that made the workflow easier, especially the entity form. Once we had found entity form, which is a module that allows you to create an entire workflow from designing your forms to designing it so that the forms automatically respond to people who send things in. So for us, we're having people, teacher, authors, enter projects that address another teacher audience. So this is how you teach this in the first year of college. So they submit this form, it comes in, we have a waiting list, and we can actually see each form. The block module, I think I have all the modules here that we're using, which seems like a lot to me, but I actually don't know enough about Drupal to know what the average number of modules is. But the block module, so most of our sites, most of the pages on our site have a view that's in a block, which is a piece that appears, and you can control what page those appear on. And then also, we rely heavily on the taxonomy module, which is perfect for us. So we use vocabularies of terms for sorting and searching our different projects. So the software vocabulary here, you can see, can you read out some of those softwares?
3ds Max, After Effects, Arduino, Audacity, Adlib, Blender.
So these are the sort of things that you might, somebody might have developed a project for students for, and this way they can tag up to 5 of those, so it's not just, this is a project about this, but if you're working with these sorts of things, it might be useful. The tag vocabulary holds the key concepts associated with the project, so these are things like color, code, data, digital output, distribution, drawing. And then there's 2 tools outside. Are we on time? Okay, there's 2 tools outside of Drupal that were absolutely necessary for us as people who didn't know what the hell we were doing. The first was our bug tracker, Bug Genie. We all had experience with project management before, so we kind of fell naturally into using it. And it actually made things flow much quicker, and we could keep track of everything that was happening and as we discovered things. Although personally, it kind of created a feeling of conflict sometimes, because when you clear out that queue and then you're working with these 2 other people who are your friends and they add 6 more things, it's kind of different than a work situation. It feels a little personal. And then we had 3 major development stages. Building all the basic functionality, that took about 2 years, I think. And then debugging that functionality, so to where we felt we had an internal beta. And then we moved to a beta stage where we were adding our own content, because originally that was what drove this. Like, we had developed this new media teaching first-year students and we wanted to publish it. Let's make an online textbook. And then the stage we're in now, which I would call like an extended public beta. When you're on your own client, you can run this shit however you want. But right now it's just sort of out there. It looks good. It works. And then the other thing is the bug repository, which I will take personal responsibility for having the need for that, because I was working in the old-fashioned way of the mid-90s, late 90s, where you just download the file from the server, you update it, you stick it right back up. If you are younger and you may not remember that that was a way that things used to be done, it's a terrible way. So I wiped out about 14 man-hours of work between the 3 of us, and so we immediately installed our own local Git repository, so that so now we all have our own local server to develop on, and then those combine into a combined development server, which Drupal is fantastic for being able to create multiple. It was fairly easy to implement that.
No, you're fine. Okay, so as Adam mentioned, currently the site is in sort of a live beta format. We are testing. We've invited trusted advisory board members in, granted them contributor-level user accounts to add project and essay content, and we're using that as a means to test the user flow and gain feedback and get back-end user experience feedback and gather feature questions and requests. So we're kind of doing this all at the same time. We've also initiated a public call for project and essay contributions with a May deadline, and we'll use that activity as to test the anonymous process and to test the proposal process and the editorial flow as well. So after a project proposal is accepted, and we've done a few of these, and a contributor account is created, contributors add their content, then editors are notified to review content, moderate, and publish. And the lecture before talked a little bit about the admin tools being slightly alienating to some audiences, so we're sort of having to sort through those responses as well. After a project is published, contributors can return and modify the content as the material evolves. New drafts will be moderated by the editors and published. This is the thing that's kind of the radical departure from conventional textbooks, or sort of the disparate use of random websites to hold your content for teaching. And currently we have over a dozen projects in various stages, and that many submitted proposals waiting to be reviewed, and development is generally complete for now, which is good news. We just need more time to focus, organize, refine, and supplement the content. So what happened is we had this gigantic scope creep right at the front end where we wanted to make this really fantastic project, but we had to dedicate the first chunk of our lives on the project to developing the tool to make it happen. So now we're sort of scrambling to finesse and massage the content into place, and also reach out to the broad audience and educate them about how to use it and why this is important, etc. This slide shows some contributor content waiting to be reviewed, edited, or refined. In addition to editorial tasks, we are expecting an ongoing cycle of maintenance needs and growing list of features. It would be very helpful to find copy editors with pedagogical experience and interests, and engaged developers we can work closely with. At a research university, this might be easy to accomplish, but at a school for art and design, we find ourselves facing the engagement gaps that we're also trying to address. In the future, we are imagining the ability to fork projects for alternate versions from new authors, the ability to add experiences with projects or comments, and the ability to build curricular paths, sort of a meta projects relationship flow from existing projects. So Array has been a labor of love going on 2 years of actual production because we've had to squeeze it between our full-time jobs, the tenure process, and the rest of our lives. We average working together on it approximately only once a month. So on those rare occasions, we enjoy the togetherness while indulging in enormous amounts of Chinese food. Thank you.
So just a couple comments before we begin. We'll take questions if anybody has them, but one of the things that surprised Scott Rigby, who works sort of in the social art or community practices sort of art world, but really doesn't exist in the academic art world. He was surprised that this wasn't already happening like about 5 years ago. I remember talking to him about things like, everybody in the software world shares everything at this point. Why you guys don't just share your syllabi and your lesson plans? And it doesn't happen. Although there's places like MIT and CMU that pretend they share things, really if you look at the original MOOC sort of thing or pre-MOOC sort of thing that comes out of MIT, it's mostly a lesson plan for a class where 90% of the class is like really important and well-known guests. So if you're looking at that, you're not going to be able to learn much about what's actually happening. Like the videos of the guests aren't online. So, and then also, we're specifically addressing other instructors. So this is information for people to learn to teach new media rather than trying to teach online. So if you have any questions, we'd be glad to take them.
These are all just beta projects.
I would consider at this point, yes.
So I had a question about going back towards the beginning of your explanation about how you customize this Drupal installation a little bit, and you hinted about kind of ripping out the theming layer. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit, why you decided to do that, or if you were just implementing your own theme framework, or if you were really getting into the fundamental theming layer and manipulating it in a certain way. It seems like an interesting direction to go.
The honest answer is I don't actually know for sure. So I can tell you what we did.
Sure.
Is we learned how to create a view and then take all of the custom templates that you can create for a view and rip out everything that was in there and then start exploding. And I don't exactly know how to explain what we're doing. We're taking the array of the Drupal object, exploding it, and then we would get a huge page of everything that it contains, and then we would just start picking out and making sure. And it was a lot of like playing, like, oh, let's print that to the screen. No, that's not what we want. Oh, there it is. We want this list of stuff. So it's a total hack, but it's the only way that we really knew like how to do it, and we all come from that background of like total hack PHP sites. So it works, it's great, and we got it cleaner, but I don't think it's any way sort of the thing that you would suggest that people do. This is like what happens, instead of what happens when you're new to Drupal, it's what happens when you're not new to web development, but new to Drupal.
Okay. That's an interesting perspective. I was curious about that.
Yes. All right, so if you could do everything ever, would you still choose Drupal and go down this path, or would you just build everything from scratch, custom build it as its own custom app?
I would never again develop a custom PHP site. It's just a complete nightmare. It's amazing. What it teaches you about content management is that you have no idea how many, maybe some people in here know it because they worked on Drupal core, but it's so complex. There's so many things. And we were just developing it for one little website for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Hong Kong Council. And it was just their specs. But they're like, okay, well, can we have this? Can we have revisions? Can we have that? And you're like, oh my God, that's so much code. So I would never go back to custom developing. Although I did say on Facebook, I said two things about Drupal. One is I posted a picture of the Drupal drop and said I made a terrible mistake. The other was that I said that, forget this, I'm going to go back to a custom web development. But I changed my mind. I don't know. Would you?
For example,
do you think it was worth it? I think
it was. Symphony too and stuff like that.
Right.
Like
I think the more we've learned, like we don't want to ask ourselves that question like if we were to start over right now, because like those 10-hour little sprints that we do once a month are just like gems in our lives. So like we can't ask that question. Hopefully if we get more people involved in the development side, like we can ask that question again and then we can overhaul it or whatever. But I like that we've all been able to sort of share the burden of finding solutions for things that may or may not be correct, but make it work for the time being. And I don't think if we were doing something completely custom, we would have been able to like share the process that much.
The one complaint I have, and I talked to the guy who's doing the intro session this morning, I don't think he's in here, is that I've sunk 3 years of my life into this. And although I talked to people last night at the dinner for speakers and volunteers who are apparently getting like 6-figure salaries out of developing Drupal, which is great. I don't get that at the Art Institute. So I've sunk 3 years of my life into this, and I know a lot about Drupal, not nearly as much as anyone else in this room, but a lot. And I can't use that for anything else. Like I don't have any more complex websites I want to develop. This is like what I have. So it does feel like there's some skills that I have that I don't know if that part's been worth it.
Yeah, for sure. This is a one-up project, which is not necessarily, like the scale of Drupal's learning curve on the front end maybe isn't the most appropriate for a one-up project. But I think it's all valuable, especially when we share the same experience back to students.
People also don't understand what it costs to develop websites. When we were first developing this, I was banging my head against Drupal. I remember Jessica saying a couple times, she's like, well, can't we just pay somebody? And I was like, we only got $2,500. You can't do anything with $2,500. So, I mean, there was no choice but to do it, and we really appreciate that Drupal was there.
On hosting
Oh, yeah.
the first year. So, yeah.
Anything else? All right, thank you for listening. And thanks for having us here. This is like a really weird experience for us. You guys talk to each other, not all of you, but the ones of you who are developers, like you talk to each other in these like weird like names of software. Like I'm a front-end loader for this. Well, are you using this? No, I'm using this. Oh, are you using this and this? And Symfony is one of the ones I've learned since I've been here.
There are many things.
It's amazingly different culture, so thank you.